Every time you feel afraid, something is feeding on that fear, and it has been doing it your entire life without you ever noticing. Welcome to a space where the hidden architecture of reality gets exposed. If that thought just made something shift inside you, subscribe, because what comes next will change the way you see everything. There is a moment that happens to every human being. It arrives without warning. Sometimes it comes in the middle of the night, when the room is silent and the darkness feels heavier than it should. Sometimes it comes in the middle of a crowded room, when everyone around you is laughing and you are standing there feeling completely hollow. Sometimes it comes when you look at your life and realize that no matter how much you achieve, no matter how much you acquire, no matter how many boxes you check, the feeling of something being deeply wrong never fully goes away. That feeling is not a malfunction. That feeling is a signal. And the ancient Gnostic texts, hidden for nearly 2,000 years, buried under desert sand, and burned in the fires of the greatest act of spiritual suppression in human history, described exactly what that signal is pointing to. The Gnostics were not a fringe cult. They were not confused mystics telling stories around a fire. They were precise, systematic, and deeply sophisticated thinkers who understood something about the nature of human consciousness that the dominant power structures of their time found absolutely threatening. Threatening enough to hunt. Threatening enough to destroy. Threatening enough to erase from the official record of human spiritual history. What they understood was this: the emotional states that human beings experience most frequently, fear, anxiety, shame, guilt, rage, and helplessness, are not random. They are not simply the byproduct of a difficult world. They are transactions. They are a form of currency in an energetic economy that most human beings never even realize they are participating in. The Gnostic texts speak of entities they called archons. The word itself comes from the ancient Greek language, and it means rulers or authorities. But the archons the Gnostics described were not rulers in any political sense. They were not kings or generals or emperors. They were something far more intimate and far more dangerous. They were described as forces that operate at the level of perception itself. Forces that do not need to chain you to a wall, because they have done something far more effective. They have convinced you that the wall is not there. They have shaped the lens through which you see reality so completely that you do not experience their influence as external control. You experience it as your own thoughts. You experience it as your own fears. You experience it as the voice inside your head that tells you that you are not enough, that the world is dangerous, that you are alone, that something terrible is about to happen. Now here is where the ancient Gnostic understanding becomes almost unbearably relevant to the world you are living in right now. The Apocryphon of John, one of the most important texts recovered from the Nag Hammadi Library in 1945, describes the archons as beings that sustain themselves through a specific mechanism. They do not create. They cannot generate anything genuinely new. They can only copy, distort, and redirect what already exists. And what they redirect is human emotional energy, specifically the emotional energy generated by low-frequency states, fear, shame, anger, separation. The ancient text describes these states not as spiritual failures, but as energetic outputs, as emissions, as something that leaves the human field and enters a system that was designed to receive it and use it. Think about that for a moment, not as mythology. Think about it as a functional description of something real. Every time you spiral into anxiety about the future, energy moves. Every time you collapse into shame about the past, energy moves. Every time you feel the particular kind of rage that comes from powerlessness, energy moves. And the question the Gnostics were asking, the question that got their libraries burned and their communities destroyed, was this: where does that energy go? Who or what receives it? And more importantly, who benefits from a world structured in such a way that human beings live in an almost permanent state of low-frequency emotional experience? The answer they arrived at was not comfortable. It was not the kind of answer that powerful institutions would want circulating freely among the population, because the answer pointed directly at the system itself, at the structures of control that present themselves as protection, at the authorities that present themselves as guidance, at the belief systems that present themselves as salvation, while quietly ensuring that the human being remains in a state of spiritual dependency, emotional volatility, and permanent low-grade fear. The archonic system, as the Gnostics described it, does not need to be visible to be effective. It does not need to announce itself. It only needs to keep the signal running, and the signal is fear. But here is the thing that the Gnostic texts make absolutely clear and that most modern spiritual frameworks completely miss. Knowing about the system is not the same as being free from it. Understanding that your fear is being harvested does not automatically stop the harvest. What it does is create a gap, a small but absolutely critical space between the stimulus and the response, between the fear signal arriving and your automatic unconscious feeding of it. And in that gap, something becomes possible that was not possible before. Choice. Not the performance of choice that the system allows you to have, the choice between two options it has already selected for you. Genuine choice. The choice of where your attention goes. The choice of what you feed with your awareness. The choice of whether you collapse into the signal or whether you observe it. The Gnostic path was never about escaping the world. It was never about retreating into some private spiritual bubble and pretending the system does not exist. It was about developing the capacity to move through the system with open eyes, to feel the fear without becoming the fear, to recognize the archonic signal without mistaking it for truth, to reclaim the energy that was designed to be taken and redirect it towards something the system cannot touch. The divine spark, the fragment of genuine light that the Gnostic texts say was placed inside every human being by Sophia herself. Not as a metaphor, as a literal description of what you are at the deepest level of your being. Your fear is their fuel, but your awareness is the one thing they cannot consume. There is an old Gnostic teaching that says the prison is only real for as long as you believe the walls are made of stone. The moment you see that the walls are made of thought, made of repeated emotional patterns, made of beliefs you inherited before you were old enough to question them, the prison does not disappear. But something in you does. Something in you that was always available but always just slightly out of reach. A steadiness, a clarity, a quality of presence that does not flinch when the fear signal arrives because it knows what the signal is and it knows where it comes from. That quality is not something you build. It is something you uncover. It was there before the fear was installed, and it will be there after every layer of archonic conditioning has been seen for what it is and released. This is not the end of the path. This is the beginning of the only path that was ever worth walking. The path that leads not away from the world, but deeper into it, with eyes that can finally see what has always been there. The truth that was buried, burned, and hidden, not because it was dangerous to the universe, but because it was dangerous to the system that needed you afraid. You are not afraid because the world is dangerous. You are afraid because something needs you to be. And now you know, and knowing changes everything. If something in this video made you stop and actually think, do not let that moment fade. That signal you just felt is real. Subscribe to this channel and stay close because what we are building here is not just content. It is a space where the hidden gets exposed, the buried gets uncovered, and the part of you that has always known something was wrong finally gets the language to understand what that something is. Share this video with one person who you know is ready to hear it. Leave a comment below and tell us where in your life you feel the fear signal running the loudest. Because the more of us who see it clearly, the harder it becomes for it to operate in the dark. This is only the beginning.